Good day, everybody. Good day. And what a special day this is going to be. I've got a special guest that's going to join us to show her special journey. Not an easy one, but a very important one to share with us. Her name is Mandee Bowsmith. Mandee, did I say it correctly?
You did.
I did. Oh, thank you for being on here with us. And I'm really excited that you're here today and how wonderful it is that you are here. Now, I've got to stop myself from speaking because I have a habit of just over speaking, over chatty. So that's why I don't usually introduce the guests, because I allow the guests to introduce themselves, because after all, they know more, right? So Mandee, could you just tell us where you're at the moment, who you are, and how you're going forward, and we'll just go with the flow.
I would love to. Thank you for having me. As you said, I'm Mandee Bowsmith. I am a human resources professional who has spent the last 24 years in municipal and state government human resources. And I've done this with attention deficit disorder. And it has the ADD has caused some fun challenges, but it's also been sort of a superpower for me. And I recently opened my own executive coaching and HR consulting firm, and am trying to help put the human back in human resources, trying to help put humanity back in leadership. And some of the sort of target audience that I'm working with are folks with ADD who are executives who may be struggling with some executive functioning skills, who may be struggling with time management skills and those kinds of things. And so I'm here to talk to you today about what I do, how I do it, and how I've been able to sort of hack my systems so that I can get stuff done.
Oh, Mandee, and thank you for that introduction. Okay, so break it down for the people that do not understand ADD. Just simplify it as best you can. You can go as in depth as possible. Just remember layman terms, please.
Sure. So the best way I can describe my brain, my particular brain, is 1,000 television sets on a conveyor belt going round and round, and they are all on a different channel, all at maximum volume. They are all vying for my attention all the time. And when I'm medicated, I can focus easily on one of the televisions and like a task or something like that. When I'm not, it's much more difficult to bring my focus onto one television or a television that I need to do. In terms of attention deficit disorder and what the disorder actually looks like, in a neurotypical brain, so, a non-ADD person's brain, the synapses fire and they meet in the brain. So your synapse fires and it meets, and a bridge happens. And that's how thoughts are processed. That's how actions are started. In the ADD brain, they fire, but they miss. They misfire. And so if you are medicated, the medication builds an artificial bridge so that your brain looks neurotypical when you are medicated. Now, certainly, there are other ways to treat attention deficit disorder that don't involve medication. There are many, many studies that prove that sometimes diet and exercise, different pretty strict regimens, can help. I choose to be medicated because I found that that's what's best for me. But yeah, so it's really the point of the medication for me is helping those synapses fire and land how they're supposed to. And it allows for focus. It allows for making sure that I'm giving the best I can give every day.
So now you're taking the medication. I mean, it must have been very hard for you to get to that stage, because you was always thinking at some stage, at some point in time, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do A, B, and C?
Yeah.
Now, can you take us back to your furthest memory when you felt, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do A, B, and C? I mean, take us way, way back. I don't care if you're in the crib, but take us back and then let's start from there.
I have to tell you that I've been very fortunate in my life. I've had people who are very aware around me, and my first grade teacher was very aware and noticed that I was acting out, that I was, being hyper, being crazy in class, and I just wouldn't do my work.
Okay.
And I was one of the smart kids. I could pick up on concepts and things we were learning very quickly, and I would get done very quickly, and then I would just act like a clown. And she called my mother and said to my mother, I think you need to have Mandee evaluated because she's displaying these behaviors, and it's it's a paradox. So luckily at the time, and this was 1986, um, the pediatrician that I saw was very well educated and was sort of on the cutting edge of ADD treatment where I
Ah,
grew up.
mhm.
And she medicated me then. And but of course, like every child, nobody wants to go to the nurse's office or, the infirmary to get medication during the school day. You don't want to be different. You don't want to be perceived as different. But what I recall when I was not medicated was just how exhausting everything was. Even the things that I loved to do. I was a musician when I was younger. Even playing music was just so exhausting.
Wow.
And reading, I loved to read. Reading was exhausting. Everything took a lot of energy and a lot of which I now know is mental fatigue, right? Because you're working so hard trying to do things. But there are things even now, so many years on, there are things even now that I struggle with. For example, I had a session with my ADD coach this morning, and we were talking about time management and how I have what is associated with attention deficit disorder and called time blindness. I cannot tell you if you asked me to do a task,
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't be able to tell you how long it would take me to complete that task. I would either overestimate or underestimate. And so for example, I'm always early places because I don't like being late, and I can't conceive, even though every day I drive the same route from home to my office and it takes me about the same amount of time, I cannot conceive conceptually of how long it takes me to get from my home to my office.
I see.
And it's an ongoing thing. And this is something that folks with attention deficit disorder struggle with. Time management issues. Um, there's a comorbidity called reaction sensitivity disorder where folks with ADD tend to take things much more personally than perhaps they're meant by
Uh-huh.
coworkers and bosses. And it's a very emotional disorder. And that's one of the things I think that people don't understand about ADD is that children in particular, because they're even small children in particular, because they don't understand how their brains are working, they don't quite understand their emotions, they become overly emotional, and we as
Mhm.
parents see them being overly emotional and we think, what is going on? Why is this happening? What is going on? And it's a dysregulation. It's an inability to regulate those emotions that a neurotypical brain could. But that spills into adulthood. It's difficult sometimes with as a person with ADD to regulate my emotions and to um, take somebody might say something that's very simple, somebody might say something that's innocuous, but I might take it as some sort of slight or some sort of um, uh, knock against me. It probably wasn't meant that way, but because I am sort of hyper aware of
Mm,
my emotional state, I may take it personally.
I totally understand that. So it affects your perception. And I can imagine when you're a
Yes.
child, the overwhelm must be actually just ridiculous. So when you were a child and you wasn't on that medication, your
Mhm.
perception was affected.
Yes.
And it was really intense in certain situations. Could you give us just three examples where that intensity actually kicked in and how you felt?
Um, when I was younger, there there were there were times, testing times. In the United States, we do a lot of standardized testing of elementary school children. And during testing time, not only was my anxiety level very high, but these tests were Scantron tests where you fill in the bubbles,
Okay.
and they were like 500 questions long. And for somebody with ADD to be sat at a desk reading a question and then trying to fill in a bubble,
Yeah.
it becomes exceedingly tedious. And then it becomes, why can't I just do this? Why can't I just do what my peers are doing and just do the test? Why can't I just focus on these questions? Things like that become very acute when you're younger, because your brain is still developing. You don't know how to deal with those things. And I remember one time in particular. I was in ninth grade. I was a freshman in high school, and we were doing standardized tests. And I had a meltdown, essentially a panic attack, a meltdown, because I couldn't understand why my brain just wouldn't focus on the task at hand. So yeah, it skews perception. It skews how you feel about yourself. It skews your self-awareness. In my case, it's very difficult to listen to people give me compliments, because I don't see myself that way.
Wow.
And so I have had to, over the years, learn how to take a compliment. Because and I also, me in particular, I'm very hard on myself in terms of my work, and the job I do and the quality of the work that I do. And so I'm the first one to beat myself up if I think I've done something wrong. But that's also a perception issue, right? Because you may do the same thing that I did, and you may think that was amazing, we did a great job, and I may think, oh my god, I could have done that so much better. I could have, man, I could have prepared more for the podcast. I could have done this, I could have done that.
Yeah.
But it's a perception
Yeah.
issue. Yeah.
I get that. That must be. I get that myself. I mean, sometimes I feel so overwhelmed myself. Sometimes I have to take a break, a breather. Otherwise, it just becomes so overwhelming. And within your personal life, that's your work. When you was at school, how it was intense, but personally, family relationships, friends, etc. Just give me some examples how it affected you from that point of view.
It's interesting. So I am married. I have a lovely wife, and I have 3 children. And in my marriage, it's very interesting because there are things within the relationship that don't occur to me to put forward. So, for example, um, commenting very often on how beautiful my wife looks,
Okay.
or um, having it occur to me to offer, let's say, I'll go pick up the prescriptions from the pharmacy today, or hey, let me take care of this thing. There are things, and it's not because I don't want to be helpful. It's not because I don't want to be a good partner within my marriage. It's that there are things that just don't occur to me. And that's an awareness issue. That's a perception issue. It also, at times, it can make me seem very aloof,
Okay.
because I may be in the middle of a conversation, and I'm usually pretty animated, and reasonably outgoing in conversations. But when I'm focusing on listening to somebody, I can seem aloof. I can seem as though I'm not listening because I'm focusing so hard on listening.
Ah.
It's interesting.
And
Um,
how is that the case? Is it the body language? Is just the way? What type of body language
right.
is?
It's body language. It's facial expression. It's perhaps I won't say anything. In social situations, usually
Hmm.
there's a cue where you respond, oh yes, or or something like that.
Okay.
Sometimes I won't even do that. And so people that, if I'm on the phone, hello, are you there? Yes, yes, I'm here, I'm just listening. Right.
Uh,
But it's not, it's something that, it's a perception thing, and it's something that doesn't occur to my brain. Whatever the social trigger is, doesn't happen for me. And so I have to work hard at that. Um, there are other things, for example, working with my sons on things like schoolwork, those things where, um, my sons also, all three of them have ADD. And so you can imagine it's kind of a crazy place when we're trying to do homework in the evenings. But we all share a trait, which is if it doesn't come easy to us, we get frustrated very quickly.
mm,
And so, helping my sixth graders out with sixth grade math, and I'm not a math person, gets very frustrating very quickly for me, and it gets
yeah.
very frustrating very quickly for my sons. So that's a way that it affects relationships, is there can be
So if
perceptions.
so, if I can just stop you there, just quickly. I'm sorry to be rude and stop you.
Oh no.
About the relationship between you and your children. So that's very difficult because if you've all got it, as you said, it's then a ricocheting effect.
Hmm.
Um, Now, regarding the maths and trying to be patient, how then, as a parent, because you know you have to, and
Hmm.
you're conscious of having to do that.
Hmm.
So, as an ADD person, a parent, I should say, as an ADD parent, what do you do to really drill down to be able to communicate in such a way that it's not awkward or not right or whatever the case it may? What is it that you do? Because you're obviously conscious of that because you want to be a great parent like all of us.
Yeah.
So as an ADD person, how do you deal with that?
So when I'm working with one of my boys, I try to chunk the concept into something smaller, a smaller chunk that we both can then mutually understand and then build upon. Because in the smaller chunks, it becomes less frustrating, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
yes, it does.
And so I find that we end up being more we end up having a more positive experience if we are both sort of in the not frustrated space. And so
Yes.
I try to chunk things up.
Mm,
I try to model the behavior as best I can.
hmm.
I try to model what it is, and luckily a lot of the times my wife is the one who helps with math homework, so I don't have to do that often. But there are things like, history and
Yeah.
essays that they have to write that we try to help with, and we try to explain things to them in ways that their brain can take in.
Yes.
And it's not, we don't talk down to them. They're very, very intelligent young
Yeah.
boys, but it's taking things in smaller chunks so that it's sort of building blocks of the knowledge and the information. And that's really how we approach it. One of the things that's difficult in terms of my relationship with my boys is that it affects behavior, and it affects the motivation to do, say, family chores
Okay.
or things like that. And because of the ADD, one of my youngest in particular, we have a list that we post on the fridge of everybody's chores and what everybody's supposed to do every day. He
Okay.
will forget to read the list. He knows where the list is, and it's pretty much the same every day, but he'll forget to read the list. So he will inevitably, when we call and say, "Have you done your stuff on your list?" "Oh no, oh no, I forgot to read the list." Right? It's something that happens every single day, having the list, doing the chores on the list. But there's a part of it where it didn't occur to him to read the list, even though
Mm,
it's been that way every day for the last 2 years. And it really is so frustrating for neurotypical people, but it really is this, um, it's a fundamental lack of occurring to the ADD person. that this thing needs to happen.
Very difficult for all of you, indeed, but it's made easier knowing where they're coming from. So obviously, your perception of dealing with your kids is so much easier because of that. It's difficult still because you've all got it, right? But you have an understanding, a root cause of where to come from. And how does your partner handle the whole situation? I mean, did she know from the off you was ADD? And if she did, you obviously spoke to her. How did you approach that? And was she able to cope with it at the beginning? How did that happen?
I'm very open about it, so she did know. I think she wasn't quite prepared for what it actually meant after we got married and we're living together, and what that means in terms of, my housekeeping and things like that. But luckily, she's a very organized, very analytical, very on top of everything kind of person, which helps me a lot. Because it's funny, we sort of complement each other, where I'm strong in things she's weak, and where she's strong in things, or where and vice versa. And so we complement each other very well. I know that it frustrates her that things don't occur to me. It frustrates her that sometimes she'll ask me to do something and I will wait 48 hours to do it. And she's, why did you do that? You had time to do it. Why didn't you do it? It's the way that my brain works. But she takes it in stride. She also educates herself. We spend a lot of time reading about ADD. We have turned to, there are magazines like Attitude, ADDITUDE, that talk about parenting, both when the parent has ADD and the children have ADD, and how you approach certain situations. It also runs articles about how you be in a relationship with somebody with ADD. And so we've been helped a lot by, reading and really having in-depth conversations about what affects me and what affects her, and how we both can navigate it. We happily enjoy a very good communicative relationship, and so that's very helpful.
How wonderful. And because what's happened, I mean, that comes down to you, because you've helped her navigate from the off, and she's had the patience to do that. So you've had a great relationship. And when it comes to friends and family, I mean, how have they coped, and how have you coped with them? Because obviously you have a relationship with them. How does that affect your dynamics with parents and friends?
There are people who don't understand how ADD works, and who may have a perception that this is just me being lazy, or just me, not wanting to participate in something. It's been difficult, because it's difficult to explain to them, no, it's not that I don't want to hang out with you, or it's not that I don't want to do the thing you're asking me to do. And sometimes you can't articulate it in a way that makes people understand that it's not that you love them any less. It's not that you like them any less. It's not that you don't want to hang out with them or spend time with them. There really is, one of the things that I find is there really is a recovery time, a recovery period, when, like, if I've been out working all day, if I've been working with clients or something, there's a recovery period I need when I get home to sort of just stare at a wall, right? To let everything kind of just, and I'm that person who I will forget to call people on their birthdays. I will forget to call people on Christmas, not because I don't love them, not because I don't want to talk to them or want to, engage with them. It's one of those things. And it's very difficult to articulate. It's difficult to make somebody understand that it is literally, it is not them, it is me.
Yeah, I suppose a lot of people will say you're selfish and all those other things. You've heard about that in the
Mhm.
past, and
Yeah,
many other words, but you obviously try to articulate things in a way that to make them understand.
yeah.
And I suppose it's a situation that's difficult for you in the past because it's you're trying not to come across that you're negative or selfish, and but you've come across great strides. There's no two ways about it. It's been very difficult. It's been a difficult journey, but it is what it is. Life is going to go,
Mhm.
and you just pick yourself up. And then it was a situation where you went into HR, and
Mhm.
now when you went into HR, was that the first job that was quite made you a bit apprehensive because of your ADD? How did you cope with that with your work situation? Was that the first,
Right.
or let me ask the question better. What was the first job you started that made you so apprehensive? Because obviously you was a bit funky with your ADD. Did that affect it? How did you deal with that? Was you feeling overwhelmed, etc.,
Mhm.
etc.? You could just give us a
Yeah,
standpoint.
when I started in HR, I started as a workers' compensation file clerk, um, working for a human resources department at local government. And that job for an ADD person, that job was terrible because it was routine. It was the same thing every single day. There was no novelty. And one of the things that ADD people thrive on is novelty and project work. And in the beginning, it was very difficult. And honestly, I considered quitting because I was having such a difficult time um, motivating myself to do to do the filing, to do the things. And then, luckily for me, what my personal story with this, luckily for me, I had a boss that recognized that I was very good at project work and would assign me projects. And so yes, I still had the filing to do, but I also had project work that allowed me to do these novel things and
Hmm.
intersperse that in. And so that's one of the ways that I was able to survive that and able to excel in that was having the ability to have the project work that was sort of a reward for doing the routine everyday things.
Ah,
And my experience and my knowledge in human resources really is born out of the fact that I did so much project work as a young person in my career,
okay.
and it gave me a vast sense of knowledge within the discipline.
That's great. But it must have taken you, how long did that take? Was it a situation you adapted quite quickly, or did it take some years?
It took a
What,
couple of years to
yeah,
adapt
I
to
thought
it.
there
Yeah.
was a journey. Just take us
Yeah.
through that journey of that adaptation, because it's not an A to B, it was more A to Z adaptation, I'm sure.
Yeah, one of the things that's difficult is, you come in and you're trying your best in a job like that and you underperform. Not because you want to underperform, not because you're a bad employee, but you underperform because it's boring, because it's mechanized work, and you don't you don't want to be there. You don't want to do that kind of work. And so then you end up sort of in trouble with your boss because you fall behind. You end up in trouble because the work doesn't look as good as it should, or maybe you make mistakes because
Mm.
you're not, you know. And there was a period of about 24 months where I had a rough time, where there was a lot of conversation with my boss about, you've got to get this one thing right. You've got to master this one thing because we can't give you more if you can't get this right. You
Yeah,
know, and it wasn't about my intellect, it was not about my ability. It was about that there was something in my brain that was causing problems for me in terms of motivation and in doing the stuff. And what really helped me to overcome it, or to get better about it, was number one, the reward of the project work that started to come about 2 years in, but
hmm,
also um, trying to gamify it, trying to make it something that it wasn't. Meaning, hey, if I can file that stack of papers in 5 minutes, then you know, I've won French fries at lunch or something, that's completely ridiculous. But that kind of thing. I've won a cookie,
Hmm.
right? But something that you can reward yourself with, and that started to help a little bit. I was not medicated at that time either, and so it was very difficult. And then probably about 5 years in, I realized it didn't have to be as hard as it was. The slog didn't have to be as difficult, and I got medicated, and that really helped a lot. Because then I was able to sort of pull back a little bit and see where where I could make improvements and how I could start building systems and how I could start using things like timers to help me stay on track with time. Using things like alarms to
Hmm.
help me stay on track and to make sure that I got to meetings on time or that I got, to places I need to go on time. Um, it can be difficult, and it can be difficult when you're surrounded by people who don't understand what you're going through, because the perception really is difficult to fight. The perception is that you're lazy. The perception is that you're incapable. The perception is that you're not intelligent. And really, most of the people that I know that I've met with attention deficit disorder are incredibly smart people.
Yeah.
They are, and one of the things that makes us pretty unique, and in my opinion, that makes attention deficit disorder a superpower, is our brains work differently. We can come up with creative solutions to problems
Yeah.
that neurotypical people don't usually think about because of the way
Correct.
our brain.
Totally. No, totally. And the thing is, and that's the situation with me. I seem to be able to see a solution almost straight away without even knowing why.
Mhm.
Um,
Right. It,
and I just think, I could speak to someone, potential client, a friend, whatever. Within 10 minutes, I always come up with a solution. And I will be honest, I do not know how I got to the solution, but the
yeah.
solution was correct for that particular person.
Yeah.
Um, and that is a great superpower. Once I um, learned to accept I had what I had,
Hmm.
and it was okay to have what I have, then I thought, okay, what am I strong in? What am I weak in?
Hmm.
Weak, I'll get other things to look after the weak side, but the strength, actually, I could use that.
Yeah.
So I totally understand from your point of view. We're very good problem solvers, massively. And now I'd like to go back to the gamification. And the
Hmm.
reason not everybody wants to or can medicate for whatever reason.
Right.
Now, you spoke about the gamification and you said you give yourself a reward. I take it you went ahead with that reward if you did what you did. All right.
Yes.
For that to work. Is there any other little tricks, little hits that you did as well as the gamification that helped?
Yeah, um I would put together a task list every day. And in the task, I would arrange the task list so that the things that I really wanted to do, I saved them. And the reason I saved them is because if I wanted to do something, if I was really fired up to work on something, that was a reward for me. And so I would try to do the grunt work first. I would try to do the stuff that I felt was a grind or just routine. I would
Okay.
try to knock that out as quickly as possible, and then I would be able to get to the thing I really wanted to work on. And that was successful for me.
Okay. So when you do things like lists, and similar things, does it matter whether it's on a piece of paper or virtually?
It I think it does matter to the individual person. I am one of those people who has tried every planner you can imagine and every productivity hack that I can find on podcasts and blogs and everything. And I love a good gadget.
Yeah.
But really what works for me is, and I've only come to this recently, honestly, is keeping everything in one place. And I use an application called Good Notes that
Okay.
syncs between my MacBook and my iPhone and my
Hmm.
iPad.
Hmm.
So wherever I am, I have that program, and it has my schedule. It
Hmm.
has my notes from meetings that I'm in. I put everything in there. So it's in one place. So I know that if I'm going to a meeting, I'm going to take notes in Good Notes. That's where it is. And because I was also one of those people that had 45 notebooks going at the same time, and I didn't know which notebook had the meeting notes that I wanted,
Yeah.
you know, so I had to and I had to discipline myself with this too, because I love trying out new applications. I love trying out new productivity stuff and new gadgets. I
Yeah.
had to really become disciplined to
Yeah.
only use Good Notes for this purpose, and to only use, this notebook in Good Notes for this purpose. And there's an element of having to train yourself to become disciplined in those kinds of things so that
Yeah.
you don't drop the ball when you're doing it. So I had to train myself to do that.
No, I totally hear you. I mean, yeah, typical man. I love my gadgets, but look, because I've got the software background also, I've got every software under the sun, and I had to stay. Enough is enough, and I had to have a rule set and
Yeah.
what I can and what I cannot do. And I won't go into that because this podcast isn't about me. I may share that another day. But it sounds like to me what you're describing also is simplification is very important, keeping
Yeah.
things simple. Is that correct?
Yes, simplification, removing friction. That's what I call it. And that's how I phrase it with my clients, is you want to remove as much friction as possible. Because if there's friction, you're going to stop, and then you're going to make a decision. Do I want to carry on, or
Yeah.
do I just want to abandon what I'm doing? Right.
Yeah.
And so really the key is to figure out where the friction points are,
Yeah.
and to ideate about how you can change that. Be creative about how you can remove the friction.
Yeah.
And so, for me, removing friction is I have a very set routine in the morning. I do things in a certain order.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that is because then I remember to brush my teeth. Then I
Yeah.
remember to take my medication. Then I remember to do these things, right? I remember I also, when I come home, I do things like I put my keys in the same place every day, so
Correct.
I know where the keys
Yeah.
are. So
Totally.
you remove the friction of where the hell are my keys? You
Yeah.
know, where's my wallet? Where's my phone? So I've trained myself to do things in a particular way every time, so that I don't have to think about where my keys are. I know where my keys are. I don't have to
Yeah.
think about where my sunglasses are. I know where my sunglasses are. Those kinds of things. I've removed that friction. And so when I talk to my clients, and especially leaders, right? Um, it's how can you, within your leadership role, identify the friction points, and how can you then creatively address how to remove the friction so
Yeah.
that it's easier for you to navigate in that space.
Totally.
And um,
Mm.
it's about removing friction. It's about making things flow easier.
Yeah, and I suppose in a form also what could be added to that is a routine. So when you're talking about you're talking about the keys, etc. I've been doing that since a child. I've had to do that since I can remember.
Hmm.
Is knowing where your keys are. As you said, I always put things in a certain place
Hmm.
because I may forget, and I
Hmm.
usually do, but it doesn't matter because let me look behind me. There it is.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
removing friction, I've done that all my life since, like I said, I can remember back when I was 3 or 4, and that's the kind of thing I used to do. I always do this. If I forget where it is, doesn't matter because I
Yeah.
always put it there.
That's right. It really, and it sounds so silly, right?
Yeah,
And it sounds so simple. And it is, if you
yeah,
can train yourself to do it.
yes. It takes time to do it, and
Mhm.
it took me, I suppose, well, it was natural for me because I did it when I was super young. So, and I'm sure it did take me time, but it's part of life and it's what we do, right?
Yeah.
You simplify everything to the maximum. Otherwise, you get so overwhelmed so quickly, and it makes us go a bit doolally. Would you agree?
It does. It does. Absolutely.
Totally. Okay, so we're starting to go through your journey. HR, 2 years. You started to crack the code when it came to work. You got your project, and you started medication at some point, and that really helped you. And then you got to the stage where you wanted to help others. How did you get to that journey from being HR? I believe you was in HR for how many years? How many years was it?
24 years.
Yeah, I thought you said that. That was
Yeah.
a very long time. So how did you go from that transition from, right, okay, I've been doing this for 24 years to it's ready for me to help others? What happened? When was that ha moment, that light bulb?
Actually, it's so last year I sought coaching, ADD coaching for myself. And I was an executive in human resources, in a government entity, and I was starting to feel like I was unraveling. I was starting to feel like I just was not able to perform my best, and I needed some help. And so I sought out a coach and found a coach and have been working with her ever since. But there was a point where I realized, probably about 3 months into the coaching process for myself, there was a point where I realized I do some form of executive coaching every day as an HR professional. There was never a day where somebody wasn't asking for advice, wasn't asking me to help them solve a problem, was, I was a sounding board to listen to ideas, or I was just letting somebody speak because they needed to get something off their chest, they needed to vent or something. And I realized that I had been doing this in some form my whole career. And when it was time to make a change, um, things had gotten to the point where I was so stressed out. I could not, I didn't see my family very much because I would leave before they got up in the morning and I would come home after they went to bed. Like, my work schedule was insane. And so when I decided to make a change and open my own firm, I decided that I wanted to help human resources professionals put the humanity back in what they do, because a lot of HR departments are perceived as being very robotic. They're seen as being very routinized, and that people are not really all that humane and helpful. And I hate that. In my opinion, human resources is one of the only internal service departments that an organization has, and the role is to help employees and potential employees feel at ease in the workplace, in what they're doing, so that they can do the work that they've been hired to do, right? And so I really want to help HR professionals put the humanity back in what they do. But beyond that, I want to help leaders. I want to help leaders put humanity back in leadership. I want to help them understand that showing humanity is not a sign of weakness relative to leadership, that it is actually a strength, and that your teams, if you show them a little human kindness, will follow you anywhere. I've seen it happen on a number of occasions. I've seen culture change on a massive scale happen. I've been a part of it. And I decided when I opened this firm that I wanted to share my experience with my clients and with, people I connect with in this journey. And I want to share my passion for humanity in leadership and in HR. And I want to be able to help people through my experience, so that they can find opportunities to learn and grow. They can find the thing that makes them passionate. And so that's how I came to wanting to help people in this way.
Mandee, that sounds wonderful, but we're going to test you. So,
Oh,
how do you add the human into humanity with HR? How do you teach your clients to do that? Just give us a snippet.
Sure. So here's a scenario. You have an employee that has experienced a family member loss, and that employee maybe doesn't have much paid leave on the books, and let's say they use up all of their leave trying to take care of end of life things for that
Mm,
role. Let's say it's a parent, for that parent,
yeah,
and they come back to work and they're distracted. They're just not there. They're not the same person they were when they left maybe 4 weeks ago.
yeah.
And somebody who is not practicing humanity within human resources would call that employee into a meeting and say, "You're not performing. I
Mm,
need you to perform. I'm going to give you an oral warning because you're not performing." A, an example of the humanity is calling that employee into a conversation saying, "How are you? How can we help you?
mm,
What do you need so that you can continue to be successful in your job?" Now, I'm not talking about special treatment. I'm not talking about contravening rules or regulations or policies or procedures. I'm talking about asking somebody how they are, meeting them where they're at, and being flexible with them, giving them the grace. Because
mm,
usually, for example, when somebody loses a parent, they spend a lot of time on the end of life items for that parent.
yes.
They don't spend a lot of time on themselves to grieve the loss of that parent. And so when they end up returning to work, they're still reeling, they're still grieving, they still need some help.
Mm,
And just approaching that employee and saying, "Let us know if we can be helpful. Let us know if there's something we can do to make this a little easier for you. Let us know if you need a little extra grace, or maybe if you need a little extra time off. Let's talk about what that looks like and how we can help you with that." Because if you have already invested so much in that employee, right? Let's say they're a 15-year employee. You've invested so much into that employee already.
mm,
Why would you not invest a little grace and humanity in them to let them get through this hard time in their life so they can still be a rock star employee when they're feeling better?
yeah.
So that's just one example. And that's actually an example in my own life
Yeah.
that I worked through.
Oh, that's wonderful. That sounds absolutely stunning. And it's only one of many scenarios that you use to help. And you've been doing this for how long now? Have you been doing this?
So I've had my company since 2019, but I've been actively doing this part of it since the end of January of this year. So
Wow.
it's really new.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And how are you feeling about the whole journey? Now it's come to this stage. It's probably long coming, isn't it?
It is a long time coming, and it's scary. It's amazing and at the same time scary because this is a different context that I'm working in than I'm used to. But it's gratifying. It's really There's nothing cooler than watching somebody, the light bulb go on for somebody when you're coaching them, or getting feedback from somebody that you've been helpful when they
Yeah,
needed your help, and that you treated them like a person, not like a number, not like a widget, not like, a cog in the machinery.
yeah.
It feels really good. And I want people to be the best versions of themselves, and I want to help them become the best versions of themselves wherever I can.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And I don't know what more we can say with that. I think that's a great way to end. Mandee, first of all, you're a wonderful person. For you to actually share your journey and how you've done it in such a beautiful way, and you're helping so many people, and we appreciate you and thank you for that. But You've been wonderful today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed my time with you.
Oh, listen, wonderful. And listeners, I'm going to have all the details down below. As you can see, she has a wealth of experience. How? Because she lives it, right? So she can not only help you, but she can help you on a specific way because she lives it, right? So she understands where you're coming from. She'll have empathy, and she is the ideal woman for you. So look down below, looking for the information. I'll have all her information. If you want to contact her, please do. Please do. And I'm sure she'll contact you back, and then you can take it from there. Mandee, is there anything you want to add before we finish off?
I'd love the listeners to know and to understand that attention deficit disorder is a superpower, and that if you're struggling with it, you can find help. You can find ways to remove some friction, and there are people like me out there who are willing to help you do it. So keep going.
And with that said, I think we're going to call that a wrap, and I'm going to say sayonara. There we go. We're finished.